Okay, I think we better start, even though people are drifting in. Welcome back. Hope you had a nice lunch. We're going to take the conversation forward from where we were before lunch. We discussed that the problem of gender discrimination is not just their problem, it's our problem. So this operates across the boundary of North and South. It's not just about technocratic interventions. It's about, if we have technocratic interventions, using them as a platform to generate wider social change and to change institutions. We talked about the value of collective action in order to empower women, and we agreed at the end that we had heard some good ideas and that we were, in some respects, optimistic, but that we had quite a lot more to do. And so the challenge this afternoon is to make that a little bit more concrete. And we're going to start with a session which is very specifically on women in entrepreneurship. And then we're going to focus, after coffee, on the post-2015 framework and on the EU's Gender Action Plan. And I know that one or two of you have some very specific ideas for the Gender Action Plan, so we want to make sure that we hear those as well. But before we get to that point, we're going to talk about what it takes to get women into entrepreneurship. And we have a really excellent panel which has 5 people on it. Michaela Bergman, who's Chief Counsellor for Social Issues at EBRD. Helen, who's Chief Executive of the Made in Africa initiative and a UNIDO Goodwill Ambassador. Rupa Ganguli, who has several hats, but among them being founder and director of SPINNA Circle, which we will hear about. Sofia Amaral Oliveira, who is technical specialist on conditions of work and employment and gender equity at ILO. And Annelies van den Berg, who's a senior expert at Plan Nederland, and all of them, in different ways, work with women who are either entrepreneurs or working in, I guess, mostly the manufacturing sector in some way. And that's a really controversial sector. You know, are these good jobs? Is it decent work, or are women being exploited in sweatshops? Are the working conditions safe? Is this sustainable, or is it simply a way to provide short-term insecure employment to women and make them in some way more dependent or dependent in a different way? So we're going to ask each of the panelists to speak for 5 minutes, and I think your job is to challenge them and really get at the underlying lessons we can learn from these stories. So I encourage you to be quite tough with the speakers. I apologize to the speakers for saying that, but I encourage you to be quite tough with them and really to deconstruct these stories and see whether we can't get some good general lessons out of them. And Michaela, we're all going to speak, if you don't mind, from your chairs. We'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm actually not going to tell you a story so much as try and explain how EBRD has tried to support women entrepreneurs. I think everybody here in the room will know the studies about the value of the untapped market, the fact that women entrepreneurs find it more difficult to get credit, that it's difficult for women, they're not on an equal footing. And just so for those of you that don't know, EBRD was set up to help promote private sector development in transitional economies. So we work with the private sector, we work with people who want to make money in the end. So the point is, why would we encourage our partner financial institutions to lend to women? And what I really want to try and point out here is that, there are many barriers, and it's not just one thing that's a problem. People know that women don't often have access, they don't have collateral, they don't have their title on the property deed, so they can't get credit. It might be difficult, they might not be treated well at the bank, they might be dismissed at the bank. We also know that even when legislation gives women equal access to their property, as for example in Kyrgyzstan, the negotiation then is around the dinner table about can you use the property or not as collateral. And as one gentleman in Kyrgyzstan said at a focus group, if I give my wife, if she's allowed to use the property as collateral and she starts her own business, it will be like a cow on my head. So there we're talking about social norms. Cow.
A cow on your head.
I quote it exactly. So there we're talking about several different things. We're talking about legislation, we're talking about cultural norms, we're talking about access to property and finance. So EBRD, we looked at all these we've done quite a lot of studies, and what we decided was that we needed to create, and I also forgot to say, sorry, is that one of the reasons that women don't, apart from the absence of collateral, is that banks think that women are a bad risk, that they won't pay back. Contrary to a lot of evidence, but this is what happens. So we've developed what we call a Women in Business program, which has 3 prongs to it, or 3 components. One is that we provide not only a loan to our partner financial institution, but we also do a first loss guarantee. So we cover the amount that the bank thinks that it's taking a risk on. We then work with the bank that we're lending to both not only collect data, because we know that a lot of these institutions don't have data, and without data you can't make a good argument and you don't know what's really going on, but also to understand, what are the behaviors, what are the, why are women finding it more difficult? There's lots of anecdotal evidence to say, for example, that actually women loan officers are harder on women borrowers, for example. So we work with the banks, and then we have advisory services to help women entrepreneurs actually, with financial literacy, with business advice, with credit. So we think this is a package, and we rolled out, we did our first one last year in Turkey for 300 million euros, and we hope that 12,000 entrepreneurs will benefit. So we're talking not at the micro, we're talking at the SME, because also what we found is that it's very hard for women to make that jump between micro and SME. So that's the target bit of the market that we're looking at. And we're hoping to also develop such programs in the Western Balkans and in Central Asia. And we think it makes good sense. If you don't enable women to be economically empowered, they can't take part in society. The economy doesn't work as well. So for EBRD, it makes both good sense and business sense to do this.
I'm still trying to visualize this man from Kyrgyzstan with a cow on his head. First of all, what did you say to him?
As a good focus group facilitator, you don't say anything. But you noted it, and we wanted to put it on our report, but we thought maybe we should. We're trying to envisage it. But I think you get the picture. He thought this would be a burden. He thought this was going to be more trouble for him. He didn't want it. And that is in a country where you have very good legislation. And the interesting thing is that we're doing a comparative study between Jordan, where actually the legislation isn't as empowering for women, and Kyrgyzstan. And in the end, they came to the same point, because in the end, it was a personal negotiation. So that is also why, in the long term, you have to look at social norms as well.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you very much. Helen, will go straight to you.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I don't have a fancy presentation with me, so you just have to bear with me in the next 5 minutes before I return the floor to you. I will start with my story. My story is about Africa. I came to Ethiopia in 2011, and it took me less than 3 months from to decide to investment to actual production to export in Ethiopia. And in the following 6 months, I doubled the Ethiopia's export revenue in the shoe sector. By month 12, I recruited 2,000 local workers. By month 24, I recruited 4,000 local workers. Before my success in Ethiopia, the country has a private industrial zone, which they struggled for 5 years to attract any international manufacturers for export. But after my success, the Ethiopia government built its first government-owned industrial zone, and I've been asked by the Prime Minister's office to help them on investment promotion. With less than 3 months, without any advertisement, all the factory units, 22 of them, has all been listed out to international manufacturers from India, Bangladesh, China, Turkey, which they created thousands and job afterwards. Actually, all I have done is very simple. Why? Because success brings success. All I told them is what I've been done, and I showed to them. At the same time, I've been asked by the president of Rwanda, and also the president of Senegal, the president of Liberia, and also the president of Ghana to help them on industrialization. So I set up the Made in Africa initiative to help African countries to develop sustainable and inclusive development through job creation and economic transformation. And today I would like quickly share 3 things behind my story. Number 1, why did I came to Africa? I did not pick Ethiopia. Ethiopia ranked 125 according to World Bank doing business. It was actually Ethiopia who picked me. The story started in March 2011 when the late Prime Minister Annelies of Ethiopia had a meeting with the chief economist of World Bank, Justin Lin, and he asked Justin's advice on poverty reduction and economic transformation. Justin gave him 3 advice. Number 1, poverty, job creation and export generation, it is the key for poverty reduction. Secondly, the fundamental secret for economic transformation for Asian Four Tigers and Japan in the 1960s and China in the 1980s is because they captured the window of opportunity during industry relocation, which enabled the country create millions of jobs and help them on jump start in their economic transformation. And the last thing he gave as a remedy to the late Prime Minister is to create a quick, successful examples, because that will bring inspiration, experience, and confidence to Africa. That is how the story started. So first thing I want to share with you, it was leadership and vision who brought the story into Africa. Secondly, private sector did not come to Africa to do aid. They come to Africa to do business. But through business, they achieve development goals. If anybody telling you it's very easy to do in manufacturers in Africa, that must be a lie. Why? I share you my personal examples. When I first met the Prime Minister and the Minister of Ethiopia, they told me, Helen, come to the country. You are doing 100% export. All your raw material will be tax-free. But in reality, it was not the Prime Minister or the Minister sitting at the port clearing my goods. It was a junior clerk who probably paid less than $100 per month clearing my goods. And you ask that person to make a decision he never made before. It's never easy. So I had a brush to brush the shoes. They say this is the brush to brush human teeth. It need to be taxed. I have a machine to make a hole on the shoe. They say this is a gun. It's illegal. It's a weapon. You cannot import it to the country. So what I have to do as the vice president of the company, I have to personally meet the Minister of Tax, get his organization chart, understood he has 6 deputy director generals. I went to meet each of them and then get the names and the telephone numbers of the next 2-layer manager below each of them. And I gathered the 20 people into a meeting room and I prepared a presentation telling them, who am I, why I came to the country, what I have done, and what am I going to do, and the problem I encountered. And afterwards, I take all of them to the production line, seeing from the beginning to the end, and everything become rosy. You might ask me, Helen, why did you take all the effort to do that? Because I've been inside of Africa. Because I think you see things differently when you are inside compared when you are outside. What most people know about Africa, from the television, from the newspaper about Africa, war, disease, corruption, that's probably most people know about Africa. But when you're inside, you see another perspective. I work closely with the Minister of Industrial, and I could call him 10 o'clock in the evening when I had a problem. And he would meet, he has a very busy schedule the next day, but he would meet me 7 o'clock in his office, trying to understand what is my problem. For an investor, if you have a minister who can come to the office earlier than the cleaner, I think that means a lot to me. And also, there's another instance. I went on a field trip with the minister, and then when we go to the rural area, we're seeing some women and children that are suffering from hunger. So the next day, I went to the minister's office, delivered a check of $100,000 and I said, please give this to the village. Ask them to buy some food for those women and children. The minister looked at the check, but then he returned it back to me. He said to me, Helen, I don't want fish from you. I want you to teach me how to catch the fish. Please take this check back. I want you to use the money to buy more machines to teach us how to produce. And this is why, actually, I do believe in Africa. I think if you give them a chance, they also give you a chance. And since we're here to talk about entrepreneurship, the last point I want to talk about is entrepreneurship. I had my executive MBA from the best business school in Europe, and I worked 10 years in the top financial institutions in London before I returned to China. But if you ask me the real entrepreneurship from developed country and developing countries, I think there's a slight difference. Let's say if you have a tiger in front of you, the business school or the big institution will teach you, get your laptop, study carefully the characteristic of the tiger, and then you think how you are going to conquer the tiger. But the problem is, once you've done all the studies, the tiger might be gone. But for underdeveloped countries, I think it's very important the ability of entrepreneurship is to jump on top of the tiger when you see the tiger and then ride it. I am a strong believer of leadership, sustainable commitment, and successful examples. And I think that is going to bring us from vision to action, from dreams to reality. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. We've had cows and tigers. I want to see what the other panelists are going to come up with. Just before we go to Rupa, Helen, there's often a big debate about whether we should favour small and medium enterprises or go for slightly larger enterprises like your shoe factories in Ethiopia. And on the one hand, in the small enterprises, women can be their own boss, but also people often say they'd much rather be in a bigger enterprise where there are proper health and safety and so on conditions. Do you have a view on that, and do you have experience in the two sectors? I think
before you talk to that topic, you have to understand what is the most important thing what you are doing. Actually, I think it's to learning what is the international best practice. Can you just learn it with a small entrepreneur, or you have to learn it from somebody who has been doing it for many years? And I tell you one example. When I first came to Ethiopia, I went to the local factories, and I asked them, how do you think about the productivity? They told me the day you give the salary to the workers, the next day, a third of them will disappear. 15 days after they spend all the money, they came back to the factory again. This is a typical lack of discipline. So despite whatever the wages in Africa, you don't have efficiency, you won't have productivity. But this is typical lack of discipline. In China, we faced the same problem 20 years ago. But over the years, we had the discipline and remedy to develop it. With my production, I can achieve 70% of the efficiency compared with China. How did I do it? When I first came to Ethiopia, on our own budget, we recruited 86 Ethiopian university graduates. We fly them to China to teach them hand by hand how to make the shoes. When they returned Ethiopia, they started to teaching others. And actually, for us, because we are doing export, we are not just focusing on the domestic market. For us, the cluster creation it is more important because the bigger the market, more orders going to come. So it's very good in my best interest to develop the local market. So I also have, after 2 years I production, a lot of people I trained started working for other people. I'm fine for that because the local industry is becoming bigger. So this is my view. You have to very important to learn from the best before you think the smaller ones.
That's fascinating. I'm sure we'll want to come back to that. Rupa, do you have an animal for us? I'm talking to Rupa.
Well, you never know. They might just come up with the course of the presentation. Well, good afternoon, everyone. And, wow, I'm not sure I can actually top something with cows and tigers, but let's see what I can come up with. Well, my name's Rupa, and I'm here to present SPINNA Circle, which is, I'd like to believe, quite an interesting approach. I won't call it unique, because in today's world, nothing is really unique. Somewhere, someone's done something. It's a question of trying and bringing together the different elements, and also trying to figure out how all those elements could work together. So let's look at what actually happened. Like many good things, and I'm sure a lot of business today was actually conducted over orange juice and coffee or tea outside rather than in this room. And exactly the same way, about 2 years ago, we had a passionate discussion about how could women entrepreneurs, and not just workers, but women with wonderful ideas and enterprising ideas across the textiles and clothing industry be shown and allow their concepts to become a reality. Now, I've worked in the textiles and clothing industry for about 15 years now, and wearing various hats, as you mentioned earlier, right from development to private sector. So we figured, what's actually happening? One of the key things is that it still happens to be a very disorganized sector. There's a lot of skill, lots of talent, lots of things all over the place, and quite often, actually, Many women across the world have beautiful skills and talents to offer. Many of you in the audience are wearing gorgeous outfits, and many of them actually are made using certain traditional skill sets. But the difference is that it's been mainstreamed, so you can actually buy it somewhere. The idea was then, how can we find a practical way to bring these skill sets to the marketplace, get the value that they deserve, and develop them into businesses, rather than just little handicraft outlets or boutiques across the world. It was actually pretty logical. It was about bringing the skills together, connecting women, putting them together into hubs, and quite often it's actually local. Locally, there are many women who actually would work together and have scalability and capacity as compared to just one of them trying to reach out. So the first element was about creating hubs and connecting them. The second element was actually seeing how could we link these hubs together? How could we link these hubs together amongst themselves and globally? The idea then was in trying to see how can technology come into play. I think in today's world, we're in 2015. If we said that, well, electricity is a problem, internet speeds are a problem, so let's not touch it, I think that would be a core mistake. It's like saying that several years ago, electricity was expensive and we used candlelight, so let's not try with electricity because it's too difficult. Same way today, internet is a problem in many places, but it's about thinking of how we might overcome it. Already we have about 200 women from various parts of the world, and I can tell you internet is not always very accessible for them, but they are online and they are ready to show their products. Then the next step actually was in saying, right, we've got this wonderful level of skill sets. We've got women across the world with skills to offer. What next? And that's where I normally tend to say, I have a plan, but we together have a solution. And that's exactly where we started bringing stakeholders on board from academia, from business, from government, from development organizations, and bringing them onto a platform together, having negotiations, roundtables, and asking for your inputs to think about how can we actually bring these women into the visible limelight, grow their businesses, and at the same time, look at a business deal globally. The third step, and the most important perhaps, was in trying to figure out what could be a potential operating model. And obviously, as everything else, we're only 2.5 years old, we're just toddling, and we're learning. And three key things came into play. One, most importantly, networking. And I think collaborating, speaking with each other, connecting with each other. The second step was accessing skill sets and training and accessing information, because that was one of the key elements that seemed to be the problem, why they couldn't come out. And the third step was, right, we've got the networks, we've got the skill sets, now how can we become visible? How can we present ourselves and to the right people? So let me give you a little bit of a few examples and a few slides on how we've managed to do that. This is our online portal where every woman has the ability to join and connect. We do have language barriers, as we were discussing just before the event. But at the same time, right now, technology has gone ahead quite a lot. And one of the things that we're working on is actually having the site in your own language when you log in, depending on what you choose. So that is beginning to take effect. For the moment, it's in English. They can connect with each other, they can conduct business with each other, as well as with buyers who are online. The second step is actually connecting academia as well as industry. For example, we had a project in Uzbekistan and Kyrgyzstan, and we had basically people from there and Kazakhstan coming to London, working with the designers to develop products that could sell in the market. Now, one might think that that's an academic thing, but at the end of the day, we actually had a buyer, and I'll tell you a little bit more. This is a little bit about Ethiopian cotton blankets and scarves that were being made in Addis. As you just mentioned about Africa, I actually just came back yesterday from Addis. The third thing is also connecting young, skilled designers, also in developed countries. Quite often people believe that, UK, Netherlands, France, these aren't places we need to worry about. But women entrepreneurs, small entrepreneurs across the world have similar problems. And connecting them to the right buyers, the right skills is critically important if you want the actual scalability and growth to happen at the SME level. We've had trainers come in and speak about critical topics such as IPR, which is really important as well, because quite often many of the topics, many of the things that women had would just get robbed off them. It would be taken and then multiplied somewhere else, and that's it. Their idea is gone, their skill set has actually been taken away from them. And in a very simplistic manner, trying to give them some inputs. We have partnered also with corporates, as I said. It's not just me or our little team by ourselves. We have to do this together. The multicultural aspect of working is actually one of the core elements that seems to make this work really well, because sharing best practices, sharing some backgrounds and cultures actually allow people to understand each other much better and also connect with stakeholders in different parts of the world much better. We've had, it's been a two-way process. It's not that people are just teaching people. It's also about women with skills teaching the buyers, because they know more about their trade than a buyer sitting in London or New York. The third and last part is actually about marketing and showcasing, which, as you might imagine, is the core element of the bottom line of business. And that requires, as you might imagine again, engaging with stakeholders at a variety of levels for people to understand. This particular meeting took place about 2 years ago, at the very beginning of our discussions about how we might be able to engage and what is important, bringing women together from the fashion networks as well as from suppliers from across the world. That was in London, where we again tried to engage with corporates, high street, as well as government, to try and understand again what were the core elements in the model that would need to be changed, perhaps inputs that would come around, and what could we do. An example of what can happen: Peruvian and Kyrgyz fashion in a Bishkek fashion show in a beautiful yurt. That is possible. And a lot of those outfits actually got bought in terms of orders, not just that particular outfit on the stage. Again, technology, I think one has to be on the forefront. I'm just going to show you a couple of examples of our women in different parts of the world who started with an idea and a concept and have been able to now showcase, have had the confidence in showing and understanding that they can be business women. And I think confidence, I think a couple of people have spoken about it in the morning, is one of the core elements of making it all happen. Finally, I would say what we also do is have a kind of an umbrella hang tag, sort of like a collective mark, which allows the women in the network to have that on their products with a little QR code, which takes it to the story or the film or the video, which unfortunately, due to technology, I wasn't able to show you today, but those hang tags have stories showcasing that, the actual story of the women behind the product. That's a story of the Ethiopian scarf hanging on King's Road and Regent Street in the anthropology shop, coming straight from the looms in Ethiopia, also online. And finally, what we do right now is looking at how can we get these small entrepreneurs to have a visibility using, again, technology, which is one of my core pet projects, is having an online portal to test orders and to look at how they might be able to reach you as the end consumer by test marketing their products. So essentially, that's our little story over here. And happy for any questions. Thanks.
Very much. That's fascinating, and it's different to this morning's discussion. This morning's discussion was about political leadership and creating women's movements and collective action and so on. This is a story about how we nurture, support, find and empower entrepreneurs, either through banks or, as we can see here, two individuals. So just before we come to the other two speakers, I'd love to hear some reactions to this. Impressed, not impressed? Any questions, any observations? We'll take three. Usually this side are a bit quieter, so we'll start over here. Somebody, yes, please, at the front. Where's the microphone? Could you come down to the front, please? Please.
Yeah, I'm Linda McAvan, the chair of the Development Committee in the European Parliament. I think what was very refreshing was particularly to hear very concrete examples from Helen about doing business in Africa, about what's needed, the problems, and how things can change, and bringing your example from China as well, that interchange of learning from each other. So I think, for me, that's refreshing. Often, when we have these discussions, and we had we often have lots of words on paper, general statements, but not much practical examples. I think this is very good that we hear about the lessons and we try and take those lessons and put them into, and learn from them, put them into our programs for the future.
You know, your history, your own history before you became an MEP was working on regeneration in the coal mining areas of the UK, where I guess very similar problems arose about how to find entrepreneurs and nurture them. Were there some agencies that were particularly helpful or some approaches that worked that we could learn from?
Yes, I mean, and also very different traditional roles for men and women in those communities. You know, men did the hard work down the mines, and the women went and worked in textile factories, in fact. That's what happened. And so the lessons is that I think you need big companies to come in. You do need that. You do need major employers to come in. But you also need a lot of local business support. If you want local business to thrive, they have to be handheld quite a lot. We set up a lot of incubation units for small businesses, and many of them have become bigger over time. We still have problems. I mean, the mines have been closed for 30 years, and in those areas, not everything is resolved. There's still lots of issues, but we have seen progress, and we have seen new investment come in. But to get entrepreneurship, I mean, people who've worked in very large organizations, to become entrepreneurs is difficult, and it requires support, and so you have to put investment into that. And also we put investment into our schools as well, to make people think about, can they set up businesses as well.
Linda, what does an incubation unit do?
An incubation unit is, for example, you create, we set up like what we call managed workspace. We have and the council did this, they built buildings with European funding actually, for people from the Commission who are here, and you provide small units where very, very small companies, micro companies can come. 1-2 people, they can set up, they will share facilities, they'll have a common area for IT, for training, and so their costs are very low and they get a subsidised rent, normally for the first few months. And the idea is that they move from the incubation unit onto a bigger unit once they are developed. So a lot will fail. That's business for you. Many will fail, many will not succeed, but some do succeed. And many of the people coming into small businesses were women entrepreneurs, actually, in communities where there was no tradition of that work.
I think that idea of incubation, and some succeed and some fail, we might want to come back to. Anybody else want to come in from the floor at this point? Yes, please, the lady there.
My name is Iluta Laze. I'm from organization Marta, Resource Center for Women in Latvia. And I'm impressed by all the stories that were shared. And I can just join and strengthen this idea that that's very important, that we work on equal partnership basis, and that we view our partners, for example, in Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, that we have everybody to learn from each other, and there is some things that we can give to each other. So that's very important, and that also these structural things and policy things are very, very important, that we have tools. For example, if there are cases where girls are given, families want to, that they are married at a very early age, or there is domestic violence that is not recognized in the country and so on, that we have these, that we give these tools to them to start something on their own, and that they are recognized by their families, and they are valued and respected by their families when they bring income to the families.
Very good, thank you very much. I think we better go back to the panel, because I don't want to feel that you're left out. So Sofia, will go to you next. Thank you.
Okay. So, good afternoon. I would like to start by thanking the Latvian presidency for hosting this event and for the invitation addressed to the ILO to participate in the discussions of such a timely and relevant topic, which is very much in line with the theme of the International Women's Day, which we will be celebrating at the end of the week. So I'm going to follow with the example of the first speaker of this panel and speak a bit about what the ILO is and what it does regarding entrepreneurship, women entrepreneurship development. So you may know that the ILO exists since 1919, and since its founding it has been committed to promoting the rights of all women and men at work and achieving equality between them. So the ILO's vision on gender equality recognizes this goal not only as a basic human right, but also as intrinsic to the global aim of decent work for all women and men. So this is the decent work agenda, which is basically what guides our work at the ILO. In this context, the creation of decent and productive jobs for women and men is, in our view, the sustainable route to prosperity for individuals and families, and it is one of the most pressing development priorities of our time. And as part of this development priority, fostering women's entrepreneurship can be a key means of generating employment and can contribute to the economic well-being of the family and communities, poverty reduction, and women's empowerment, thus contributing to achieving development goals. So we've heard that there are, despite all of this potential, that there are barriers that hamper women's economic success. And in entrepreneurship specifically, we've found that a multitude of inequalities relating to time, human and financial capital, and social constraints hamper women's entrepreneurial entry and growth potential. So, I mean, I'm not going to go over the barriers because we've discussed them, but I would just like to point out that in addition to the legal and regulatory frameworks and the lack of access to formal finance mechanisms and limited mobility, one of the issues that is important to take into consideration is the unequal share of family and household responsibilities and lack of maternity protection. And I think that it's important that we stress this aspect, especially when we talk also about women entrepreneurship in small and medium-sized enterprise or micro-enterprises. So efforts are needed to support women's entrepreneurship development, and what the ILO has been doing, what the ILO's approach has been to women entrepreneurship development, well, it has been recognized already by the tripartite constituents of the ILO. The ILO is made up of governments, employers, and workers' organizations. And it has been recognized by these tripartite constituents that women's economic empowerment is crucial for a sustainable society already in 2007, and they called for targeted programs for women's empowerment and entrepreneurship. Again, in 2009, with the resolution concerning gender equality at the heart of decent work, the tripartite constituents recognized again that gender equality was a necessity for sustainable development and poverty reduction for women and men, improving living standards for all. So, in this context, it should be part of national development policies, including affordable and sustainable public programs and child-independent care services for all. So, in line with this gender policy, the office's approach seeks to redress existing gender imbalances in enterprise development through approaches and activities aimed specifically at women, while simultaneously working with constituents to ensure that small enterprise initiatives address gender in their formulation and rollout. And one of these initiatives are part of the ILO Women's Entrepreneurship Development Program, which we call it WED, W-E-D, whereby the program works with partners to increase these economic opportunities for women entrepreneurs by supporting them in starting, strengthening, and expanding their enterprises. So this is done through a comprehensive package of tools, advisory services, and capacity building, and it aims to increase knowledge about women's entrepreneurship. It aims to also provide a platform for the voice of women entrepreneurs to be heard and to contribute to shaping policy. So I think that this is also an issue that was raised this afternoon and this morning already, the question of voice, which is important. So this program has 4 key pillars. The first pillar is policy level building, locally adapted recommendations, and strengthening women's advocacy role in this. And on the policy level, we bring forth evidence-based, consulted, and prioritized recommendations for a more enabling environment for women's entrepreneurship to thrive in a particular country. The second pillar is the service providers increasing their capacity to effectively serve the needs of women entrepreneurs. And this is really working with service providers to support business development with financial and non-financial products, to understand, so that they understand the challenges and opportunities of women entrepreneurs, so that they may improve their service provision and increase its relevancy to women's entrepreneurs' needs, for example, through training on gender-specific barriers. The third pillar is increasing access to markets. And finally, promoting women entrepreneurs as role models. So this is a point which I think you're all also trying to do today with this photo exhibition outside, where you really promote women as role models and leaders in entrepreneurship, trying also to show that it is possible to achieve the success in both the entrepreneurship side, but also in reconciling your work and family. And this is done through the program, through the Months of Women Entrepreneurs events, which are so far rolled out in 9 countries. An important part of this pillar is also strengthening of the sustainability voice and advocacy of women. So I would just like to go on to point out
Another minute?
Yes, just about what are the lessons learned. I mean, we've been looking at, we've been working on women entrepreneurship development projects for over a decade, and recently the ILO has sought to take stock of the evidence of the effectiveness of women entrepreneurship development programs. And there is growing evidence that the programs which fosters women's economic empowerment lead to more sustainable impact and broader gains on women. So what are the insights and the lessons learned? I think this was one of the questions that we had to answer. Well, the first conclusion is that promoting women's entrepreneurship and gender equality helps to create employment as well as to empower women in the family and the wider community. The second conclusion from this taking stock of the programs is that it is essential to give gender awareness training for the suppliers and the service providers in developing their capacities to serve the needs of both female and men entrepreneurs. Another conclusion is that maybe the training in skills is not enough, and as many women lack the confidence, they need an additional push, and they lack the belief in their entrepreneurial abilities. So combining business training with financial education, access to credit, access to networks for women's entrepreneurs, strategic partnerships and networking, this is key. So the possibility to bundle these services is a good, it shows from our analysis that this is a good practice.
Sofia, one more, because we have to stop.
Okay. So just finally, really supporting women entrepreneurs associations can also improve advocacy and services for women entrepreneurs. So it's really important to give a voice to support their organization, and this collective action that was key. I mean, I will stop at the moment.
Thank you. Listen, what you've actually done is given much more detail of this kind of incubation model that Linda was talking about, is what you might actually do in a place. It's just a really useful checklist. Let's hear from you, Annelies, and then we'll have a conversation with the audience, and we'll have 35 minutes to do that. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So when I read the topic of this panel, my first question was, why are we expecting more from women entrepreneurs than from male entrepreneurs? Because normally, I think from entrepreneurs, we would just ask them to make money and reinvest in their business. But apparently, on top of that, from women entrepreneurs, we're also expecting from them a multidimensional contribution to sustainable development. So why is it? Why isn't it enough to support women to become entrepreneurs so that they can become economically independent? Why do we expect that through their business they'll also invest in their families, the communities, and the environment? Well, one of the answers, obviously, is that research from the World Bank has shown how investments in women entrepreneurs yield a double dividend, because women are more likely than men to invest their incomes in their families and communities. And this is driving GDP up and bringing illiteracy and mortality rates down. However, in my work with women entrepreneurs, I've noticed that this can also damage their business. For example, if a family member has to go to the hospital, or when tuition fees for kids need to be paid, then it's often expected from women that they'll take some money out of their business, or even take a business loan to pay for these expenses. So yes, we could say that women entrepreneurs also support their communities, but is this really what we want them to do? Is a double dividend argument that's often used to promote women entrepreneurship not something that we should actually demystify and strive for men to take more responsibilities for sustainable development? What strikes me in particular about the double dividend, or triple dividend if you also include environmental benefits, is that many women entrepreneurs are already facing so many extra hurdles. For example, in many countries, women cannot hold land titles or inherit property. This gives them already a huge disadvantage compared to men. Not to mention the hurdles to even getting there and becoming an entrepreneur. You may be familiar with plans Because I'm a Girl campaign, through which we support girls' rights and also girls' access to quality education, because globally 62 million girls are out of school, often as a result of gender-based violence and harmful practices such as child marriage. Therefore, any solution towards gender equality and women economic empowerment has to invest in girls' rights to quality education and ending harmful practices. But let's go back to women entrepreneurs and the double dividend. Actually, one of the best practices from the field that I've come across was from a women entrepreneurs organization in East Africa. The organization supported women entrepreneurs to improve their business. And the key message towards their members was to keep the financial accounts completely separate from the business account. Actually, they were teaching the women entrepreneurs to say no to sick relatives and say no to hungry children, say no to thirsty husbands. When evaluating if and how their members had benefited from this support, it became clear that most women had really valued this advice and that they had managed to grow and expand their business. Plan has identified many valuable best practices. There are excellent examples of how solidarity among women entrepreneurs can create shared value business cases. For example, a women organization that encourages its members to critically look at their supply chain and identify opportunities for female suppliers, in particular like small, rural, micro-entrepreneurs. The women's organization fulfilled a role as a matchmaker and allowed many poor and rural women to become a supplier for bigger companies and expand their business network. Other great examples of solidarity-based practices are microfinance and investment opportunities through women organizations. Many of these women organizations, they manage investment funds or give out small loans to starting women entrepreneurs, often involving hands-on coaching between established businesswomen or angel investors and startups. These initiatives have shown great results, not only in terms of repayment of the loans, which is in most cases up to 100%, but also in terms of economic empowerment of disadvantaged women. So these are just a few examples and just a few of our best practices. Women and girls' economic empowerment, and especially entrepreneurship, is an important area of work for Plan, with many opportunities to unlock women and girls' potential, support their economic independence, and contribute to the development of their communities. Because in fact, there is certainly a case for the double or triple dividend for investing in women entrepreneurs. But we should also be aware that we cannot ask that from women entrepreneurs alone. Also, we should let women invest in their business first, because once they have an established, well-running business, they will be able to employ more people and invest in other women entrepreneurs and in the sustainable development of their communities. And finally, I'd like to point out that there's so many opportunities for directly supporting women entrepreneurs globally as an individual. Through the increasingly circular and digital economy, we can get involved in online coaching of starting women entrepreneurs. We can invest through crowdfunding platforms in micro businesses by women entrepreneurs. There's a lot of opportunities. So to wrap up, I think it's really important that all these things, from access to quality education to ending harmful practices, as well as support for women economic empowerment and entrepreneurship, are included across the whole SDGs framework and in the means of implementation? Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I like very much the way you made the connection back also to not making easy assumptions about killing 17 birds with one stone, which is kind of the point that was being made this morning from Sweden. You know, don't send women out to work unless you have good childcare and good health facilities and good reproductive health options and so on. Listen, I sort of feel everybody's rather agreed, which is not a good place to be when we have half an hour of discussion still available to us. Does anybody feel, these are inspiring stories, and you can see how when you put these pieces of the jigsaw together, either small scale or large scale, you can make a big difference. And that what makes the difference is actually the enthusiasm and the commitment of individuals like the people sitting on the panel. And the obvious answer is, why don't we do more of it? But does anybody have a different view? Anybody got any questions about these stories we've heard that they would like to pursue? We have two people down here. Please, one of you and then the other.
Okay, so I start now after this very interesting presentations, and I would like to, first of all, to mention that I represent the European Agency for Gender Equality, European Institute for Gender Equality, which works mostly for the European Union member states. And while listening to the examples, I was comparing in my head, you know, the report we did for the Greek presidency, which was on the women and economy, where we analyzed in particular small businesses and the form of self-employment. And the findings showed that women, that's 28 EU member states, the weakness for the women in small businesses was that not only that they didn't get proper credit and possibilities, but mostly when they established companies, they were like a one-thing companies. They depended on usually one sort of client. They had irregular income because that also depended on when they got the job. They had usually very insufficient funds for the pension. And in that sense, as the Eurofound, the other agency, is calling bogus employment, you know, that you are very in a risky situation if you don't develop, and usually they were employed by themselves, and very seldom they had more employed people. So, for example, the shoe industry, that was really a very, very different example. And I imagine if that's the situation among the 28 EU member states, I suppose you would find about the same challenges also in the development cooperation. So more like, I wonder how much of that you saw and what measures you would be suggesting to avoid this.
You know, that's very interesting. One of the big debates in my country, in the UK, is that self-employment has gone up a lot in the recession and afterwards. And the question is this a kind of measure of last resort where people are just forced into self-employment, into entrepreneurship because they can't find anything else with exactly the characteristics you describe? So we might ask the panel to comment on that in a second, and your neighbour.
Yeah, I have... Thank you very much, first of all. My name is Sasha Gabizon. I'm with Civil Society Women's organization, Women in Europe for a Common Future, and also co-facilitating a global network of women's organizations on post-2015. And I had a few questions. First of all, to Helen. Very interesting, your work in Ethiopia. And I was just wondering about these women for whom you had given the big check. Yeah? These are probably not the women who you would be able to bring into the factory with an employment, because they might be the ones who suffer from what Annelies mentioned, yeah, the domestic violence or the just a lack of any basic social protection which would allow them to put their children in school, so they might not even be able to work, right? So that's a question. Do you have any advice from what you have seen, and giving that check to these women, did it also bring them into even the possibility to join the labor market? How can you take that very first step to bring in these most vulnerable groups? And my second question was really to the EBRD, and I already mentioned it to her during the break, that my organization, we also work in Kyrgyzstan and Tajikistan and Uganda with women on sustainable development. And so we promote women's entrepreneurship in sanitation and renewable energy. And we often have the barrier that to invest, we find that in the local communities, when you want to take money from a bank, a microcredit institution, the interest rates are extremely high, 30% per year or so. And you make an investment which might only start paying back after many years. It's not a commercial fast investment. So how can we bridge that gap? How can we get money at much lower interest rates so that you can make long-term investments, and which normally can only be done by the state, right? But we are asking this to be done by households. We're asking households to invest in energy and households to invest in sanitation. So that is these are my two questions to the panelists. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Anybody else want to come in? Please. One over there.
Thank you very much. I'm Sofia from University of Latvia. When we are talking about entrepreneurship and business and women, I'm really wondering why the question about the women on the board of big businesses, women in the councils of businesses and big banks, and especially in Europe, was not discussed. Because we are sure, and I'm proud to hear all these stories, women working on the ground, really producing goods. But what I see where Europe really could contribute, it would be to develop policies that a decision-making power in business, particularly women, are taking much bigger share. And this is what is possible to do here in Riga and Brussels and London to take more, to take down this male streaming, as it was discussed in previous session. And to say that the women should be also taking bigger part in decision-making in respect to businesses. And then I do believe that the question about big interest rates could be tackled from the perspective of the real women, small entrepreneurs, saying that this is, our policy is wrong in this respect. And I would like to get more discussion into the really decision-making power for businesses from the gender equality perspective.
Okay, so here's the case against, right? You're selling false gold, you 5 people on the panel, because although we see some successes of women who are able to build businesses, many fail. Many are simply offered precarious employment with very poor economic conditions, posing extra demands on their families and on their childcare capacity. They are not participants in the market as we would like them to be because the interest rates are so high and so on. And actually we're attacking the wrong problem because really we need to start with the boards of the big businesses. And probably you should all close your activities and do something else. So that is the case against. And I would now like to hear your defense. And we'll start with you, if we may.
I'm not actually about to defend myself, but let's get the story a little bit straight. Well, let's try and... First, women's on board. I absolutely agree. The title of the session was about women entrepreneurs, not women on board, so I didn't actually talk about it. At EBRD, we really are, with the companies that we invest in equity, we ask for nominee directors to be women. About 45% of them are women. It is something we're quite, we follow, and absolutely it's very important. There are 2 ways of tackling it. As you know, in Norway, they had legislation, and they tried to do it in the EU, and it didn't work. I sit on the fence a bit. I think I move on the fence about whether it's good to legislate and then you create patterns and expectations, or whether actually you're doing a disservice because women become token directors. Whatever it is, I think it's a journey, and probably this isn't, it is important that women make decisions in companies. Now, when we work with companies that we make direct investments in, one of the things we often do is we look at what we call equality of opportunity. So we look at our client and we see where are the women, not only what tasks are they doing, but what decision roles are they taking. Where are they, you could say, horizontally across the company and vertically. And then we often work with them to see what are the gaps. I mean, depending on what the type of company it is, it could be very basic, like there are no female changing rooms, and so they don't even attract women. or it could be because the education system doesn't teach them the skills. It could be because they're hiring in the old boys network, so to speak, so they don't go through the open processes. It also could be to do with prejudices. But by making our clients or actually think about it, you often change things quite a lot. And we've had quite a lot of success about changing not just numbers, but decision making. But we work with companies not on a, so, you know, that's on a one-to-one basis. The other thing that you, why don't we give lower interest rates? And why don't we work with small communities? Firstly, let's say EBRD was set up. We're not supposed to alter the market. We're additional, so people come to us when they can't get money elsewhere. So we're not going to lower the interest rate because otherwise the market would serve it. But having said that, EBRD does work in very small communities, in Kyrgyzstan, for example, where there's no water on 4-story houses. And we match that with grants. So, and then it's the city that borrows from us. It's not communities that borrow from us, and I think that's probably a better way. And then it's, you know, it's making services more sustainable, but we don't actually lend to small communities.
Okay, Helen, I want to leave you to the end because I think I want to bring you to a slightly different subject in addition. So let's go to Rupa next.
In terms of just speaking about self-employment, I think that was a topic that I could probably speak about right away. Is it the measure of last resort? Well, it is a measure. That's how I would look at it. There are lots of women out there, whether it's in the European Union, and we have women in London as well, actually, who were living off benefits. And starting off with ideas, using their skills that they already had, but were latent because they had no way to sort of use it and use it productively, if you like. Take it to the market in a way where it could be acceptable and you would potentially be able to buy it as a consumer, or a trade buy, meaning a retailer or a buyer from a big brand would be able to actually work with them. I think self-employment is better than no employment in some cases, where you're actually just continuing to live off benefits, continuing to suck off the system, and not actually using skills that you might have by yourself. So what we look at in terms of how self-employment can be made more attractive or grow at a rate that might be, can be scaled is what we look at. And that's what our facilitation works at. So that's what I would say about self-employment. The second thing that I can talk about is in terms of how do we make it sustainable? We actually also bring men to the table. So it's not like, we're not just talking to the women. We're not just sort of saying, oh, right, you have the skill set, come along and let's sort of, help you with the business. It's about educating the men as much as actually building confidence in the women. And it's actually about talking to the men more in many cases than women, because I couldn't be here if I didn't have a supportive family. And I think the majority of us would believe that in anyone, whether you're male or female, if you need to do your work, you need a supportive partner. You need a supportive community and a supportive family. And that's essentially one of the core requirements of any woman coming out of the house or any man coming out of the house. So essentially, that's something that we work on very, very closely as well.
And I suppose, if you're going to be self-employed, you'd rather be in SPINNA circle than not in SPINNA circle, is of course...
Well, we can link you to the market. So I think that's the bottom line of business, isn't it? So here you go.
Let me go to Annelies next, and I'll come back to Sofia and finally to Helen.
Thank you. Well, let me get back to the lost... Oh, it's on. Good. Let me get back to the lost battle that you mentioned, because actually, I don't think it's a lost battle at all. At this age, before the lunch break, someone mentioned that the previous age seen the abolition of colonialism, and that now women, this time we'll see the end of women discrimination, but also this time there's so many things happen in terms of digital opportunities. And I think for women entrepreneurship, it gives us the opportunity to be involved globally. I could, for example, set up an investment platform that would allow you to invest in rural entrepreneurs in, let's say, Zambia, who want to start a company on producing textiles, or it could be anything else. And so we're bringing everything closer, and we can be directly involved. And also the access to all this information is giving so much knowledge and opportunities to women worldwide. For example, if someone in a rural area wants to start a business and has access to internet and technologies, you can easily look up patterns, designs, you can do your market research. So I really think it's far from a lost battle. So especially for entrepreneurship, I think there's so many more opportunities to engage. And at the same time, I think what is also changing is the mindset. I mean, I've noticed in my work that companies really want to get involved. For example, I mentioned the supply chain example. So we're discussing with companies how can their supplies be sourced locally? How can we involve rural women entrepreneurs to provide these supplies? And businesses are very open for that. I think much more than before. So I think that the time is absolutely right.
Sofia, when you look at women's employment in the formal or kind of semi-formal sector, is most of it in large firms or in small firms? I mean, if you look at Bangladesh, for example, Deb may be able to help us later on. Hundreds of thousands of women probably are working in factories, which is not quite the same as entrepreneurship. Somebody's entrepreneurship has created the factory. But do we have a sense of, you know, these two sectors are complementary or are they substitutes? How do they work together?
First I would like to speak a bit about the importance of the role of the employers for women entrepreneurship development. I mean, this is the employers and the employers associations are key partners in ensuring that women can actually start and grow their businesses. And what the thing is, what we see is that although, and to go a bit to the question also that was raised on the participation of women on boards and on big companies, what we see is that the majority of women in entrepreneurship are they are in small businesses, so they're not on the boards of big companies, they're in small companies. So when we talk about, the ILO just published a report which is accessible on the website on the participation, actually the ILO's employers department, on the participation of women on company boards. And although we see, so there is a call for more involvement of women in company boards, and although we see some encouraging signs, it's far from being a good thing. So yes, I think that what you mentioned is that yes, we see that women are more involved in entrepreneurship in SMEs, in small companies, rather in these large companies. In large companies, we're talking more about formal employment, and it's a different focus. So when we talk about women entrepreneurship development as part of the WED program, the focus is really much more on micro and SMEs rather than on bigger companies. I mean, we're not there yet. One thing that I would also like to mention, also to answer one of the questions that was raised, is that it is really key to work also with the men of these women, and this is also something that we got as a result of the evaluation of the program, is that where there was training for the families, for the community, it was reported that the men, some of the results of the projects that were implemented showed that after the project, the men took up more household chores, and the women were actually freer to focus on their business and in starting and developing their business. Because it's not just starting. The issue is how do you make sure that it grows to be a sustainable business and that actually constitutes decent employment. So I think that this is the key point.
Very good. Helen, I left you to the end because the story you gave us was not actually about working with single women, one sewing machine. It was about creating industry. And I guess most of those big industries were probably not owned by women. They were probably owned by either international companies or men. So how does that translate into longer-term opportunities for entrepreneurship among women?
Okay, I think this probably goes together with the other question about actually development. What's the role of development? The way I see it is, first of all, there's a priority is very important. There's an old saying in China which is that whether it's a white cat or a black cat, as long as you can catch the mouse, it is a good cat. So whether it's a small entrepreneur or a big entrepreneur, whether how it started, is what you are really should be focusing. So actually, I find it very interesting you are spending time talking about big or large entrepreneur instead of talking about how they can catch the KPIs on catching the mouse. I think actually that should be the key focus. And I think that is, and also going back to the lady's question in terms of sustainability for vulnerable group, I share with you how we did it in China. In the company I used to work for, we had 25,000 workers in China. How we can grow to this kind of size with less than 5 years? Because it is actually a market-driven activity. When the whole market is booming, and then we developed our own remedy. We provide, when we go to Ethiopia, we are the first one to provide free clothing, free food, 3 meals to all the workers. Because also in China, we are providing free kindergartens to all those women. Because loyalty, sustainability is the most thing to the company. Is this a role of the government, NGOs, or is it a role of the private? I would say actually it is a role of the private because it is a private best interest to make the business sustain. So maybe you should leave this to the private to do. Then maybe you can consider what's actually government and NGOs' roles in the early stage of the development, which is to provide certain examples, and then let the market to drive the rest of it. And I want to also share you another example about what I've seen in Ethiopia about training. When I first went to Ethiopia, I also went to the Tibet schools, which government and also development agencies spend millions of money in it. And I wanted to recruit people from those schools. But you know what I saw? I saw a German teacher who has never worked on a single day on a production floor and never managed any production, teaching theories about the students. So as a result, I didn't recruit a single person from that class. And as a result, nobody actually recruited people from those Tibet schools. But what happened after I came to Ethiopia? Anybody who worked more than 3 months in my factory, they can get 20% more when they go to the other places. So the government asked me actually to provide the training to the peoples. So actually, I think going to development is very important. Because we are talking about action, it's important to guide the giant of action instead of giant word to make it happen first.
Okay, this is actually really important, isn't it? Because we have to be very careful not to kind of idealize entrepreneurship as the only option. Because the mouse is actually not running a business. The mouse is quality of life and support to the family and all those other things. And maybe the quickest way to catch the mouse is to open a large clothing factory or shoe factory in Ethiopia. But that doesn't mean to say that actually there is a role for entrepreneurship and we should support and incubate women who want to do it. Does anybody, is that a conclusion? Anybody want to comment on that, please? Can we have some microphones at the front? Deb, I might call on you to say something about women's employment in Bangladesh. Next panel, saving the best.
Thank you, Mr. Maxwell. I come from Bulgaria. My name is Katia Todorova. I am Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs. And as a representative of my government, I would like to express our gratitude to the Latvian presidency and to the European Commission for choosing this very important topic, women's empowerment and sustainable development. I have to make some comments, but let me stay seated because my notes are written. It will be quickly done.
But relatively brief comments, if you don't mind, because we have only a few minutes.
Yes. In Bulgaria, we attach particular importance to the women's full participation in political, economic, and social life. Women are considered as one of the biggest sources of potential growth. The Bulgarian government is making every effort to improve the legal and institutional environment for promotion of women's entrepreneurship. The meaningful performance of women occupying leading business positions in Bulgaria is a result of the consistent government policies in promoting gender equality, as well as of their personal qualifications, courage, and perseverance. Bulgarian women are successful owners and co-owners, managers, and executive directors in a number of fields: retail, market, services, real estate, construction, industries, tourism, etc. The operative EU funds and programs are available for businesswomen, and further improvement and enhancement of social services will allow them to accommodate better their personal lives and professional endeavors. I wish to highlight in particular the good collaboration existing among the government institutions, local authorities and non-governmental and private sector organizations aimed at improving business climate in Bulgaria and promoting products and services produced by female entrepreneurs. In this regard, the Bulgarian Association of Women Entrepreneurs plays a key role in assisting women in setting up and maintaining their businesses by providing useful information on the state of domestic and international markets. The contribution of the association is valuable in helping women entrepreneurs.
Can you manage to finish in about 30 seconds?
Yes, I'm just finished. Identifying business partners and markets in the country and abroad, and implement investment projects for attracting foreign investment. The association has developed a concept to establish a national network of women entrepreneurs through an internet portal where businesswomen will be able to offer their goods and services, seek partners in the country and abroad, and have increased access to investment opportunities. The organization has launched a number of initiatives focused on success stories and challenges for businesswomen in the region of Southeastern Europe. I would like to say these words because the experience of this association is very interesting one. I have some other notes, but it's enough for the moment.
But actually, the really important point about multiple stakeholders working together locally to create these facilities that enable entrepreneurs to flourish, I think, is a point I want to take away from that. I know Michaela wants to say something. I promised Federica Petrucci, who has been evaluating the GAP, the Gender Action Plan, that she could have a minute before we finish because she has to leave, and it will link very nicely to the last session. So, Michaela, let me take you, then we'll take Federica, then I will try to summarize.
I just wanted to say that indeed, I think when we're talking about the empowerment of women, we're talking on very many many areas. So absolutely, they've got to have access to free transport. Not for transport that's safe, sorry. They've got to have access to water to enable them to be able to then go out to work. They need to be able to make a choice. Do they want to start their own business or do they want to be employed? I think what we're talking about is providing an enabling environment for them to make decisions about their own lives, not to force somebody down to be an entrepreneur or to be. I think that's important. I mean, we're not trying to force. I couldn't be an entrepreneur, really. I couldn't. I'd lose money. But some people want to be, and I think that they should have, the ability to be able to do that.
One sentence from Helen, and then.
I just want to say, actually, as a woman entrepreneur and now to how to power women, I would say, actually, don't forget, one of the best gifts as a woman what we have got, which is compassion. And sometimes as a woman entrepreneur, just put women into the job, they can do very well. That is empowerment, and never forget the compassion.
All right, I think I'm coming to a conclusion about this session, which is different to the one I came in with, so that's always good. But before I summarize, Federica, where are you? Please, can we have a microphone here? And this is to help us make a link to the evaluation of the Gender Action Plan, which is a very specific topic we want to have on the agenda before we finish.
Yeah, hello, I'm Federica Petrucci. I'm working in DEVCO at the European Commission Evaluation Unit. So DEVCO is International Cooperation and Development Directorate. And okay, as you said, we are working on the finalization of these Gender Action Plan and more globally on the EU strategy to support the gender equality and women empowerment. And the result will become public at the end of the month, because we are still finalizing. But what I wanted to raise is just more general lesson learned even from other evaluations, and a few points which are recurrent. One is which we can make a link with this panel and the next one. One is the fact that there are general principles, norms, rights that we should have to be localized. So how to localize rights and how to localize good practice. And the one issue that we have to improve is the contextual analysis and the gender analysis at country level, because we have to identify windows of opportunity where we can act to have more leverage and to have a bigger impact. So at the level of the donors, at the level of development partner, we are really to improve this analysis, political economic analysis at country level, and to improve also cooperation among the stakeholders, not just Commission, European institution, member state, but also the other international partner, civil society and private sector. So the new dimension of the multi-actor strategy, especially for public and private partnerships. And another point is to take this multi-actor strategy also at the level of political and policy dialogue with the partner government, and so that this circle can be closed. This was what I wanted to raise. Thank you very much.
Have a safe trip home. Make sure you send the details of the evaluation to the organisers when it's out.
Absolutely.
Okay, what have we learned? Empowerment of women to start their own businesses. It's not the only answer. It may not even be the best answer. If you want to create large numbers of jobs for women, there may be other alternatives. But it is an answer. And there will be opportunities for women to create and build their own businesses. But it's a risk, and it doesn't just happen like that. Saying to women, go away and create a business, may not be the right answer for individual women or even for women as a group. But if you're going to do it, you need to have this incubation package around them, which makes sure that you're providing, you know, all the social services around, but also the credit, the technical support, the access to markets, the trade facilitation that you showed happening, and all the other things that are necessary that help with finance and accounts. And above all, the lesson I take away from this is that if you want it to happen, you need some really inspiring women, and maybe men, but people, to work with these women to help them to build their businesses and to provide the support. And I think in this panel, we've had 5 inspiring women to help us understand this problem and what can be done. So please join me in thanking them.